Central Park Southwest. So I go up the elevator. I knew the apartment fairly well because I'd visited Ivy and Charmy and Terry Deuce in their apartment several times. And so at the front door to the apartment, Charmy was there. And I'll never forget, because it always looked so amazing to me, Charmy's looking as if I was the last person she expected. "Oh, Don, you're here." And goodness, she had known for days that I was going to be there at such and such a time, so I thought, well, Charmy has gone a little bit berserk, apparently, under some strange influence. So she said, "Well, Don, Bobby isn't quite ready to receive you yet. There's some people who are ahead of you. So would you like to come up to my bedroom and sit there and wait?" So I thought, well, that is very kind, because I'd just taken a quick peek as we walked by the entrance to the living room, and I saw 20, 30 people milling around there. And after an all-night trip on the airplane with very little sleep and an upset stomach, trying to be polite, because a number of them I knew, and I just can't be polite when I feel miserable. I've never mastered the technique. If I'm miserable, I got to act miserable. So there we are. So Charmy's invitation was very welcome to me. Up the stairs we go, and I've never been in their bedroom, and so I look in, and it looked charming, girlish, and so on. But the thing that I noticed was there were two late teenage girls sitting over on the window seat. So I said, I've gotten from the frying pan into the fire here. I'm going to have to try to make small talk with them. I knew them slightly, and I knew they were jabberboxes from way back. So I said to myself, well, I better go over and say hello. So I started to move towards them, and they looked up and looked at me and said hello, and went right back to gossiping with each other. So that was a real cold shoulder, and I thought, well, that isn't very polite, is it? But I was so grateful that I didn't have to talk to them. I didn't spend much time with hurt feelings at that point. So here they are, over at the window box, exchanging, jabbering away, Don sitting on the corner of Charmy's bed and just feeling sort of miserable about nothing at all. And as I was sitting there and just waiting, all of a sudden I felt sort of a strange feeling in my throat. And I thought, good heavens, I think I've caught a throat infection on that blessed plane last night. And what a horrible time to start coming down with a cold. And I was not, very happy about this happening. And so as I was thinking about, I wonder how fast it'll come on, all of a sudden it went up my eustachian tubes up towards my ears, and I said, my golly, I'm going to get an ear infection as well out of all of this. And this is really galloping. I'm going to be a sick man. I just hope that I can get down and shake Mayor Baba's avataric hand before I have to go to bed or maybe to a hospital. I've never felt like this. And just as I was dreaming up all of this scenario, to myself, all of a sudden I felt something rolling down the side of, my gosh, it's in my eyes, and my eyes are watering too already. And then, you know what? I suddenly realized it wasn't a cold. I was crying. And here I am, 3 years old? Yeah, 33 years old at that point. A real good mystic number, I'm sure. Anyway, 33 years old, and I hadn't cried since I was 16 years old, and my Scotch Collie dog that my father had given to me when I was 1 year old died. That was the last time I cried. And here I am. I don't even know why I'm crying. My Scotch Collie hasn't died again. I couldn't figure out what under the sun was going on. It was just incredible. Excuse me for laughing. It wasn't laughable. I just felt horrible, and the tears rolling down. Then, of course, the next thing I think of is those girls sitting over there. They know me. And if they see me crying, what sort of a story is going to go out from here all around the Baba circles? Old staid and stable Stephen sitting over on the edge of Charmy's bed crying away, and heavenly days, So this just so horrified me. I tried to get a grip on myself, sniffing, and or a little dab, but I thought they were looking in my direction, trying to cover it up, and just barely got myself under control when the door opens and Sharmi comes in and says, "Don, Bob is ready to see you." So I thought, well, we got through that one barely. And so I tromped down in back of Sharmi, and we go through this 2-story, great vaulted living room that they had there, and over to the far side on the right, the street side, Ivy Deuce had put in a small room there for a library. And Ivy Deuce had wonderful taste, she really did. She had done all of the color and selections and so on. It was an absolutely gorgeous bandbox of a room. I loved it. And so it has a double door into it, and I figured evidently Baba must be in there. So Sharmi opens one of the doors, of the double doors, and I see right in front of me a panoply. And that picture is absolutely drilled right into my memory. It will be with me for the next 1,000 incarnations I've got to go through. So here is a chaise longue with the back sort of pointed towards me and the doors, and the lower end of it out towards 2 windows facing onto the street. And obviously on that chaise longue is Mayor Baba. I can't see much of him, but I can just sort of vaguely see a form, and I can see the end of a plaster cast down towards the base of the chaise longue, and another foot sort of slightly over the side of the chaise longue, not quite to the floor. And in front of that chaise longue is the most incredible contraption you could ever have dreamed up. You know the old tin wash tubs that your grandmother used to put a scrubbing board in and scrub clothes in hot water? Or maybe you're too young, you never even saw one of those around. Well, they were very common at that time for washing by hand. And Ivy Deuce had gotten that from somewhere and had bought a block of ice, and she had gotten a little fan from somewhere in the apartment and put it on the far window side and was blowing the air across the block of ice to Baba to cool him off. This was the air conditioning system, the avataric air conditioning system. And on the street side there were obviously 4 Indian people, all smiling across the block of ice at Baba. And then over here on the right was Ivy Deuce with 2 or 3 miscellaneous other Westerners. And I took this all in at one glance, just indelibly drilled in. And as soon as that registered and was properly developed and I could see it in front of me, then immediately I saw the figure sort of turn around and look towards me, and I saw Baba's face outlined for the first time. I didn't make any decisions whether he was gorgeous or ugly or what, but I just saw the outline of his face, and he takes a little glimpse at me. The foot that's been dangling over the side here, he starts moving it down towards the floor. He begins to brace himself like this to turn, and I suddenly realize that the avatar with a broken leg was going to try to get up and greet me standing. Can you imagine? Isn't that incredible? Absolutely incredible. Protocol doesn't ask the avatar to do that with a busted leg for anybody, busted leg or not. So will you forgive me? It shocked the hell out of me. I just didn't know what to do. I felt that I was making a major tragedy occur. And so my whole focus of attention was to get up in front of him and say, no, Baba, please don't do that. And as I get just around to his side and I'm looking down at him and saying, please don't do that, he sort of braces himself so his right hand is freed, and he does this. He didn't need any words or anything. I understood the gesture. I'm going to do what I please. Now let me get on with it. You see, I got sort of used to that sort of a gesture on occasion from Baba over the next years, but I was put in my place definitively right then and there, and just about instant, the two end of the four Indian men quickly got around the tin wash tub, the air conditioning system, and sprang over to Baba's sides and helped him get up, and in just a jiffy, is that a good word still, in a jiffy? I always got to check my slang with a little bear, because American slang has changed so much since I used to live here that I haven't kept up with it. So in a jiffy, Baba was standing upright, this foot not on the floor, the cast foot not on the floor at all, but standing and smiling, and I was just feeling hellish to think that here he was doing all of that just for a little old nincompoop. You know, I had a fairly good estimation of myself, but I knew I didn't merit that. So here I am, and feeling sort of sick and broken-hearted, and Ivy Deuce comes right around in front of Baba and smiling and says, Baba, this is my boy Don. And so Baba doesn't greet this with a smile at all. He pulls back sort of this way, and it was the first time I saw him look sort of disgusted, and so he wiggles his fingers, and one of the four, I think it was Sir Roche, read the gestures to me. Your boy Don, he's my boy Don. Now, Ivy Deuce was a very intelligent, high-powered woman, and I had never heard anybody address her in that fashion in all the time. I'd known her several years socially in the petroleum business before she became a Murshida, and nobody had ever said anything in that tone of voice. I mean, the Avatar's gestures had a tone of voice. I can assure you of that, and it was very obvious. So I switched from being heartbroken about Baba to horrified what Baba was doing. I said, my God, we're going to live through a storm from this one. So, but, and then he goes on and said, we have been together since the dawn of time. But, you know, what does my mind leap to? Not, isn't that lovely to have been with the Avatar that long? No, I said, this guy has a corny sense of humor. My name is Don, and the dawn of time. So here we are, you see. How spiritual can one get, you know, at first meeting with the Avatar, corny sense of humor, trying to be more American than Americans. So I was trying to digest all of this, and what am I going to say now? And Baba's looking expectantly at me, and I can't say anything. I couldn't find a word in anywhere in my head to put into my vocal cords and tell him to say it. I was just totally nonplussed. And so Baba saw that I was flummoxed, and so he said, well, did you have a pleasant trip to get out here? And you know what my answer to that was? You know, I'm a pretty vocal person. I've even been well known for giving technical addresses in petroleum, never at a loss for a word. So my brilliant reply, did you have a pleasant trip out here? That's what I said. And when I heard myself say that, I couldn't believe it. You know, this was total rebellion, breakdown, I don't know what, you know. I've never been in a situation like this in all of my life. Nothing even anywhere remotely approaching it. So, Baba looked just a little startled when I got this, out. I don't think he had ever been addressed that way before. He pulled a good one on Murshid, and now I pulled a good one on him. So then he says, and was it a pleasant trip? Well, he didn't look too startled that time. But can you imagine, this goes on for about 10 minutes? Baba carrying the conversation with Stevens getting, you know, the various grunts and groans. And I was so mortified I didn't know what to do, you know. I thought this was the most disastrous performance before the Avatar that had ever been played out in creation, even new for him. So, but you know what happened? right in the middle of all these goings on, the little inner man. Do you have a little inner man or inner lady inside of you who pops up on occasion and tells you something that you really need to know and you haven't got sense enough to know it? So the little man inside said, Don, do you know that this man knows you better than you know yourself? Very distinct words. I didn't say, to the inner man. I just absorbed what the inner man had said, and I knew it was absolutely true and it was important, vital importance. And then the little inner man went on and said, and he accepts you totally as you are. And that was even more incredible. And I knew it was totally true. And that was the first time in my life that I had ever been with any human being about whom I could say that he knew me better than myself and totally accepted me. And I realized that that is what I had been looking for 33 years. It was a pillar. It was important. It was absolutely central to my life, and from that point on. From that moment, I would say there was never any sense of insecurity, of something that might happen that would be disastrous or something. A total internal sense of encompassment, total acceptance, total protection. Not protection, let's say, to keep the baddies or the goodies are out, but anything could happen. And with that assuredness having come into your life, life would never be the same. It was on a completely firm footing. So, between the and all, that central pillar was established, and it has remained all the rest of my life. Everything that I've done, anyway, even the bad things that I've done, plenty of them, have always been solidly based on that complete pillar of support. I've never had any sense of Baba wavering in that total acceptance of Don. I didn't kid myself on many, many occasions that he was necessarily delighted with some of my performances, but I knew he totally accepted them. They were not reason for him to say, well, I made a mistake with this nut, and now some way we've got to get rid of him. Not at all. Baba's acceptance is for real, and it is total. I think this is the thing that causes so many, many people who have met him for the first time simply to bust down and cry in tears, sometimes for days. That total acceptance and total assuredness, the tenderness and the total acceptance of the avatar. It's not, let's say, a type, I use the word tenderness, and this is terribly important in one's relation to Baba. There is a type of tenderness which is absolutely incredible. A tenderness such as one has never known in any other human situation. Can you hear me in the back with that motor out there?
I think focus on you, Mark.
I think Angela is going out to tell them maybe to take a break or something because it's terrible timing, isn't it?
Well, it isn't the best. I'm really in my punchlines on the Avatar story here. Anyway, I'll try to talk up a little bit brighter. So
There we go. She got one of them.
yeah.
She's wiping off her sword.
It's an interesting performance, but I heard an echo out from that end. That's what
Well,
puzzled
they're all
me.
around the house with these weed whackers.
Uh-huh.
This is America in the 21st century, Saturday.
Well, you mean all of the businessmen are out mowing their lawns?
No, other people are for them.
Oh, I see. I get you.
That was a big help, though.
That was a huge one, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, after about 15 minutes of these umps and grunts and groans, but this terribly important little clarifying speech from the inner man, then Baba sort of draws himself up and looks a little bit abstracted from this brilliant conversation with Don Stevens. And I see that evidently he's got other things to do, and he says, now Don, there are some other people who are waiting to see me, so we will have to say goodbye to each other for now, but we will be seeing each other out in Scarsdale tomorrow morning, because you and I are coming out to talk about Sufi affairs and finances and perhaps some other things. So I look forward to see you tomorrow. So that was, just a very sweet and kind dismissal. And so I go out, I start to go out the door. I start to put my legs into locomotion, and my legs were just about as satisfactory as my vocal cords. It just didn't function. I didn't know how under the sun to get one foot in front of another. I was absolutely, totally flummoxed, flabbergasted. There's one expression, I almost forgot it, from my Western background. There's something when you've got cattle that you're going to have to kill off and butcher and take to the market. And when I was a little kid, the people who were in charge of this operation had a great big steel crowbar sort of thing, and when the steer would come down the chute, they would just whack it over the head, and we call that poleaxing the beef. Did you ever hear that expression, poleaxed? Well, that one has disappeared from. We've got to reinstitute that, because boy, that is a choice term. It describes something, that is total. But it was not brutal in Baba's case. But I realized I had been poleaxed.
Oh, God.
Totally, completely. Nothing functioned, Head gone, nerves gone, muscles out of control. I don't know how under the sun. I hope nobody was looking in my direction, because whether I was staggering and picking myself up off the floor, I have no idea. But somewhere or another I got through the double door and out into the living room. By that time there were only about 10 or 15 people around, and I thought, my God, what a spectacle I'm going to make out of myself now. And I saw an empty chair over on the other side of the room, and I thought, if somewhere or another I can make it to that, maybe I can get myself back together again. I got over to the chair. I collapsed into it. 2 or 3 people came by. I said to myself, I hope to hell they don't try to strike up a conversation. They took one look at me. I must have looked revolting, because they immediately looked away and went on. So I was saved. And I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I said to myself, my golly, I don't know, is it afternoon? Or I looked at my watch, and it was somewhere around 12:30. And because my Swedish mother raised me to observe proper health habits, and because proper meals at proper times was deeply drilled into me, and since I'd had no breakfast, I thought, well, maybe I better go out and get some lunch. I had nothing in mind. I went out, had a sandwich, I think some coffee or 7-Up or whatever not. And then what do? I find myself going back in the direction of the Deuce's apartment. I get the elevator, I go up, and Charmy's at the door. Oh, Don, you're here. Well, I didn't know I was there. I didn't know I was going to come back. And so I go in, and I see my chair waiting over there, empty against the wall, and I make it over to it. And meanwhile, my nerves and my muscles are beginning to function again, which is great. So I sat there, and time was going on, and after maybe a couple of hours or so, Phyllis Fredericks, who was the doorkeeper of the library at that point, opens the door and says, Baba's going to tell us a story. So I knew why I had come back. I was going to hear the Avatar tell a story. Terrific. So here are 10, 15 people who are starting to go in through the door, and I, being very shy by nature, and also still not knowing what residual poleaxed effects I might still have to deal with, I'm the last person going in. And so the first ones go way around over here in front of Baba's Cheslong, and I'm back here in back at the back, and then back of Baba's ears. So, a beautiful view of the avatar. So then Baba begins gesturing. And I think again it's Sarosh who is reading his gestures, and Baba's telling a story. And I've even seen that story in print recently as I was doing some work on Lord Mayor. And I've forgotten it again. I don't even remember what it was all about. But within 10 seconds, I would say, I was so fascinated by Baba's hand gestures, the beauty and the grace of his hand gestures, that I didn't hear a word. They were so exquisite that I found myself starting to do something, the sort of thing that I hate people for doing. Making gestures. And the particular gesture that upsets me the most is when somebody makes the circle of perfection. How do they know what perfection is to begin with? And this sort of public demonstration, of I know it all, it all is just nauseating. So what does Stevens do after his poleaxing? He's looking at Baba's beautiful gestures, and he starts to raise. I saw myself raising my hand like that. I couldn't believe what I was doing, but I had to do it because here really was perfection. And I had to give some sort of an indication, recognition of it. And so, as I start to raise my hand and I'm horrified at what I'm doing, what do I see? Baba sort of braces himself this way and sort of pushes this way, and he continues his gesturing, and he looks around at me, and he makes the gesture of perfection to me, and turns around and continues on with his story. And Stevens is just knocked silly again, of course. Here is the avatar, with this incredible sensitivity and timing, everything just right in place, perfect. And as I'm getting over this, all of a sudden, my minor in the university, which is mathematics, and the part of mathematics that fascinated me was mathematical probability. I immediately found myself, now I wonder how many billion chances in a billion or so on that there would be that just at the moment that I started to do this, the avatar decided to do it. That's pretty far-fetched. Now let me see now. Oh, gee whiz, that was very improbable. Meanwhile, I'm concentrating on him, but the mathematical probability side is buzzing over in this lobe of my brain. And finally I decide, well, I've got to do something about this. Because the interesting thing about mathematical probability, let's take a simple figure. If something has 1 chance in 1,000 of happening, and then a second incident comes along which has 1 chance in 1,000 of happening, the chances that they would happen successively one after another is not 1 in 2,000 or 2 in 1,000 or something like that. It is 1 in 1,000,000. It's the product of the two probabilities. If you don't know mathematical probability, go study it, because these fascinating things about creation you got to keep up with, particularly if you're around the avatar, So here we are. I said to myself, well, if I do that a second time, and if he recognizes it and turns around and does it back to me, I know it's not chance, and it's a totally different phenomenon. I couldn't resist it. I just couldn't resist it. So what do? I wait. Boy, I've been in laboratories, you see, for years in the university, working out experiments and so on. So I knew how to set up a good experiment. So I waited until the avatar, as he's swiveling his head this way and that way. Now here I am, back of his right ear, and he's looking way over there at the extreme left person in the group sitting in front of him. So I get this way, and so what does the avatar do? He swings all the way around and does it back with a great big beam, And so I said, well, no, mathematical probability is ruled out, absolutely. Yeah, this is a different phenomenon that we've got here. So that's almost the end of the story, and then everybody goes out, and so I go back to my favorite chair, and I sit there. I don't know what the hell, excuse me, I should be a little careful here. I don't know what the heck, is that acceptable? I was expecting, but I sat down in my chair again, and somehow around 5:30, Phyllis Frederick opens up the doors again and says, "Bob is going home now." So I look over there through the double doors, and I see Sarosh. I don't know where he got it, but he's rolling something, sort of collapsed up, but it's got 4 wheels on it. And then he gets Baba, he opens it out. It's a collapsible wooden wheelchair. Have you ever seen one? I think it must have been at least 2,000 years old at that point. So, and it just looks, I think you would break your hip just sitting down on the thing. It looked that uncomfortable. But he gets Baba all in this thing, and then he starts rolling him in my direction. And I get this front-on view of Baba. Baba was pretty thin at that time after all these accidents and so on. So the wheelchair must have been built for a midget or a 4-year-old, but Bob is all huddled in this thing, sort of squeezed up like this on himself. And Sarosh, if you ever knew Sarosh in real life, Sarosh was a huge, he was a double-decker, double-beamed human being. He was well built. So, he was about 4 times Baba's width, rolling Baba in the little wooden wheelchair. So what do? I couldn't resist it. Just couldn't resist it. I quickly get around behind Sarosh. And Sarosh is wheeling Baba in the little collapsible wooden chair out into the living room. And here's Don coming behind Sarosh, almost creeping on my knees, but really scrunched down low behind his back. And just as I think everything's in the right sort of shape, and Baba's looking ahead, and Sarosh is looking ahead, I start to raise my hand a 3rd time behind Sarosh's considerable buttocks. And as I do this, what happens? Poor Baba. It makes me weep even to think of it. He braces on one of these wooden arms this way and gradually squeezes himself around. Then, of course, he's got to lean way over this way to look around Sarosh's ample beams. And then he does this to Don. And he looks so triumphant. And he really beams. So there we are. So, Baba's sense of humor and playtime and all of that, it's just absolutely incredible. But that was my first introduction to Baba's extraordinary sense of humor and how much. Would you believe Deshmukh? Have you ever seen a picture of Deshmukh? A very, very prim, spectacled college professor, very serious and sober-sided. But he was Baba's favorite playmate. He could do a Laurel and Hardy act with Baba like nothing I've ever seen. And the two of them would just really ham it up. It was terrific. But that was to come on later. But that was my beginning introduction to Baba and his sense of humor. So you see, we went out, I went out to the elevator, Baba went off. The next day we went up to Scarsdale. First of all, we talked a little bit about finances. Mercedes had been collecting some very abstruse points of philosophy that she wanted Baba's answers on. Baba said, "Come, Ivy, we've got the time now. You bring these points up." Now, I've been around some very top-notch philosophers in my life, but I have never seen anything that could even come close to the manner in which Baba handled these points. Ivy Deuce had a remarkable head on her shoulders, and when she would get puzzled by something, it was a remarkable puzzle. She had tried these out for size on me, and of course I couldn't even get anywhere, even thinking about them. So here was Baba, and he would feel these, and in 1 or 2 sentences he would get to the heart of it and map out, let's say, the obvious guts of what the thing was all about. It was a remarkable performance. And so after we'd been through that and finances, and I've been around some top-notch financial people, the smallest in most of my professional life in petroleum, the smallest order I could take was a T2 tanker. So 20,000 tons or so on, you know, those are little tiny ones compared to, but that was the smallest order I could take. So I dealt with pretty big figures, and so I had to be around people who knew their way around with finances. I have never seen a man who could handle finances with Baba's astute manner, acuity of perception, and seeing what had to be done about it and make suggestions. Now this is an aspect of the avatar that I think most people wouldn't expect. But perfection is perfection everywhere. You just have to come to that conclusion. So just as he knew what was necessary for human beings to get back to their knowledge of their own Godhead, he also knew finances. He also knew manners of going about things professionally that you would think the avatar would have nothing to do with. So I saw real perfection functioning that day. Then he pointed his finger at me and said, "Don, you've got some questions for me." And I was absolutely floored because actually on the plane coming out I thought, well, who knows? I've got several important problems in my own life. Maybe I might get a chance to ask Bob about them. So I'd written down 5 little notes to myself. But for some reason or another, I was just sickened at the idea that I would even have had the stupidity to write personal problems down and to have the idea of trying them out on the avatar. I was sick at heart. So I simply said, "Baba, no, I don't have anything to ask you." Baba looked surprised because, of course, he knew I had them hidden in my wallet. And so he said, "Come on, Don." And I said, "No, Baba, I haven't got anything." And then Baba looks a little bit disgusted, and then I could see what was going through his mind. Probably they're personal, and Baba and Don doesn't want Ivy Deuce and Ivy Sr. to know what his personal life problems are about. So he looks at Murshida and sort of does this to me. "Is this what you want? You want to shoo her out, and you want me to shoo Adi out too?" And I said, no, Baba, that isn't necessary, because I knew, amongst other things, I couldn't read his gestures. So we couldn't have a personal conversation without Adi Sr. anyway. So I drag out to him, and he immediately, very simply and quickly went right to the heart of each subject, made a simple suggestion. I immediately felt right, put them into action when I got back, went back. And then in the afternoon, he reminded us that he had promised the Sufis that he would give a performance on what does Baba mean, a talk with us on what does the avatar mean by absolute honesty in your personal life. So he came around 2 o'clock back to Ivy Deuce's, spent an hour and a half talking to us about absolute honesty. I think probably the most challenging and the most profound thing that ever came my way in my life. And there were a lot of things with Baba, but this was an incredible time. And then I get on the plane about 5:30, I'm going home, and as I'm going home I think through this that happened and that what happened and these terrible grunts and groans that I gave in my conversation with Baba. It had been a very colorful time. And after maybe a couple of hours of redoing the whole thing, then I began thinking, now tomorrow morning I've got some tough problems back in the laboratory in Standard Oil. What am I going to do about that? What am I going, oh, and there's that terrible thing there. You know what happened? I realized that I'm one of the world's best worriers. Worriers, to worry. You know, don't worry, be happy, that sort of worrying. But it hadn't been invented. It hadn't been invented at that time. Baba hadn't brought it out, so I didn't know anything about all these subtleties in the esoteric sphere with worry. So, but I'm a great worrier. My mother gave me very best genes in that direction. So she was a great worrier too. So here I was getting all my pet worries out, and one of them after another. This one I wasn't worried about. There I suddenly saw a possible way to handle the thing that I hadn't seen before. And then again, mathematical probability. So I said, this is remarkable. So I got out my telephone switch, my worry switchboard, as I used to call it, and I plugged in. You remember these old sort of leads that the telephone operator would plug in here and plug in there? So I got out my worry lead onto the switchboard, and I plugged into each of the worry holes that were there, and all well worried through many times. I could not get one tiny fraction of a watt of worry worked up from any of them. So then, of course, the logical thing hit me. Well, this has been such an incredible weekend that you're emotionally drained, and so you've got no worry energy left in you. It'll come back tomorrow. It didn't come back tomorrow. It didn't come back the next week. And then it hit me. This was my first experience of avataric grace. He had cut the worry knot as a sheer gift to Don Stevens, whom he had been together with since the beginning of time, since the dawn of time. So you got to get the right word in there, edgewise. So this was what everything was built on. But during these conversations, and now we get back to the general theme of the 2 days.
Do you want to give them a chance to ask questions? Maybe get into more of it after lunch.
Yeah. One thing, incidentally, we'll get back into what Baba brought up then. We get back to the 50-year anniversary. He was saying to us, I think it was actually at the time that we were with him in Scarsdale, that he had been trying to get a book done. We had heard about the book that he had done and that funny little table thing, but it was obvious he was talking about a different book that he thought Ghani was doing. And he said, I want to get this done soon. I will have to redictate it to Irish, but when I get it done, Ivy, would you like to edit it? And then, as I told you before, and Don works with you, maybe you might like him to help. And Ivy said, oh yes, that'll be fine. So he then set this project firmly out. And several of the things that he said about the background of it, which are terribly important, especially nowadays, I find, we'll go into this afternoon. So we'll hold up then at the beginning of the story of the various different projects and the things that came up for it until after lunch. But I do want, because it's sitting right in back of you, to describe to you 2 objects that are sitting under Baba's Samadhi back there. One of them, you may recognize it as one of Baba's sadras, well patched, well darned, and so on.
Well worn.
Well worn, very well worn. Usually you don't see these except under plate glass. But Baba did a strange thing with me. He drilled it into me, Don, if I give you something, I want it to be used. And so what things that Baba gave to me, I always make a point of using it myself, being close to it, and also inviting people I love also to use it and being close to it. So if during lunchtime you would like to put an arm up against your cheek of Baba's sadra, do it by all means. It's not going to wear out, not in my lifetime at any rate. And I'm sure Baba's got an answer for the next ones who come along. So that's Baba's sadra. It was about, I think, 1955. It was Mani who told me the story. She said, Don, I have a little package here, a gift from Baba. And she says, I have to tell you, on your birthday, January 14, and this was now in November that I was there, Baba took this sadra off, and he had it given to Mayra to save for you, to present to you as a birthday present from Baba on your next trip. It's very special.
Oh, God.
Imagine that, all that time ahead preparing. But so typical of Baba, the beauty of it. And then over to the left of it, you'll see a book standing upright. This has just this last week appeared in Germany. It is the German translation of God Speaks by the best publisher in Germany. And it is, I think, the most beautiful edition of God Speaks in any language that I've ever seen. They've done a marvelous job. And the editor of this series, who is a top editor, when he read the German translation that our translator had just finished, he fell in love with it. He said, this is going to be our banner book for the spring edition. So he himself wrote the back page blurb on it, and he calls this the book of books.
Q&A. Let them ask questions.
How many things would you like to toss, just maybe rather quickly, before we all break up for lunch? Jack, what do
I
you
saw, I
have?
think it was a film of Bob in '52 with his leg described, and he was wearing a pink sweater. Was that the time you saw Bob in that film with Ivy Deuce's apartment? I don't know if you've seen that.
It doesn't ring a bell, but Baba certainly did not have a pink coat on when I saw him in the library.
Some other time than that.
Yeah, well, pink, of course, his pink coat was his favorite, even more than his blue coat.
What color coat, do you remember he had at that time?
Well, now, which time were you in the apartment?
When you met him in the apartment.
No, I don't think he had a jacket on. It was too hot weather, you see. He had more than a sadra on. He was not just in a sadra, because they're practically transparent. But what he must have had on a very light shirt or something over the sadra. Yes.
You spoke about Baba giving a talk about honesty. I was wondering if you can tell us about that talk.
Well,
It
it's
was a good one.
it is a terribly important story. As I said, I think one of the most important things I ever heard Baba say, and I would hate to try to squeeze that into too little time.
I think it's on the agenda for
It's
our
on the agenda.
Oh, it's in the agenda.
It's in the agenda
Did you
because
get
it's
that
that
agenda?
important.
Oh, I didn't read it. Okay.
This is the agenda for the 2 days, by the way. Yes, Ala?
What about transcars? I touched it already a long time with Marilyn. Well, we all, grab this Baba Sadra and touch it. Don't you afraid that all our transcars will be there?
Ala?
After you will touch it?
Ala,
then?
you're talking to me from the opposite end of creation at this minute. I don't hear a word or understand a word that you are saying. I know what you said intellectually, but it is the furthest thing from any sense of reality in Don Stevens. I don't worry about anything to do with sanskars or anything of the sort.
Oh, you failed, I forgot.
In the back. In the back of the room.
I was going to ask the same question, Roger, after what Bob said about that.
It'll come up after lunch. Yeah.
I have a request.
Yes.
Can we hear that special paragraph again before we break?
Is it in the book here?
Yes,
Yep. It's given in the book.
twice. Actually, the first time it's in the book, it's with Don commenting as it's read out, and the second time it's in its entirety. And I also have a few photocopies of this if anybody wants to have a copy. This is just the special. Read my words with your hearts open. Use the techniques of meditation I have given you for the frame of intuition, for the spiritual charge I have attached to my words to flow into your being. After that, be content that I am one within you and will guide you on the course of your life.
They're pretty powerful words. I can say that because I have no sense of authorship there. Well, shall we be silent for just a moment with Baba before we break up for lunch? Unless there's another question somewhere.
I do have a question.
Yes, please.
About the video of the great darshan, that includes the filming of the internment and Mara and Mani going into the tomb.
Yeah.
It was my understanding that there were instructions given around that it was to be shown infrequently and only with devoted followers of Baba to see it. And I just wonder about the decision now to make it available publicly and distributed.
It is not made available, let's say, through public bookshops or anything like that. And people are always asked to use discretion to whom they show it. And I have never had any sense from either Monty or Mara that there were severe restrictions on public showing, but just don't make a big spectacle out of it.
Thank you.
People that you feel close to and you'd like to show it to, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes?
Is there a story about the cover of the book? It's the colors and whatever the forms are on it? Do you know anything about that?
No, actually, it just came out before I came on this trip, and so I had a chance to send one email of congratulations to the publisher, to the head of the esoteric department, and get one very short comment back. So it's all brand new to me. It's just discovery from here on. But it's a beautiful, beautiful edition they did of it. So shall we be quiet with Baba for just a moment? Dearly beloved Baba, Amen. So we'll be together at 2 o'clock. If you were not at a meeting with Baba 10 minutes ahead of time, we found out by definition you were late. So I try to follow the same rule. So happy lunchtime. Will you forgive me if I don't join in lunch together, but I sort of like to take a little bit of quiet time in between the two. And a nice glass of red wine.